In 1936, at Princeton in the United States, the largest American university, Einstein had been a refugee there for 3 years. And he was already a legend. He was very famous, unapproachable, he was protected. But a little girl wanted to ask him a question. She had an important question. And she managed to slip through at one point and shouted to him, "Master, Master, Master, do you believe in God?" So, Einstein was a bit surprised, of course, but he answered her kindly. He said to her, "But you're asking a very good question, an important question. I can't answer you just like that. Give me your address and I'll answer you, but in writing." And about 10 days later, the little girl received a letter with this writing from Einstein, which is now world famous, in which he wrote, "Anyone who is seriously involved in science will eventually discover that a supremely intelligent spirit, infinitely greater than that of man, reveals itself in the laws of the universe." Now, that's a very powerful idea. It's an idea that he expressed first, but which is kind of the summary of the 100 years that changed science. An intelligent mind that lies behind the laws and reveals itself in the laws of the universe. So, actually, I'm going to comment a little on this diagram for you. I'm going to talk to you about a reset, the reset of science. A reset that's not a minor one, but something that happened specifically regarding the question of God's existence. So, if we take a look at a historical overview, if we look back in history, there was science in Mesopotamia, among the Greeks, in the Arab world, and in China. But after the barbarian period, it was in the Christian world, in the West, that modern science developed starting from the Middle Ages. People believed in the Logos. They believed that God was rational and that he had created a rational world. Universities were established, and science advanced up to the time of Copernicus. And from Copernicus to Freud, the new discoveries were astonishing and they shook up religion. In fact, in themselves, things like heliocentrism and evolution had nothing against religion, but first of all, they changed people's worldview, that is, people were unsettled by these new discoveries. Secondly, science seemed to start answering questions that people thought could never be answered, questions that no one would have imagined possible to even address. And it was doing this more and more. There was this idea of progress. People wondered, maybe science will answer all the questions. And on top of that, in answering all these questions, it didn't need the hypothesis of God. You know, it's the story of Laplace and Napoleon. Laplace goes to see Napoleon and explains his system to him. And Napoleon responds by saying, "But I don't understand. Newton talked about God, but you don't mention him." And he says, "Sire, I had no need of that hypothesis." So, we had a science that, for a whole period, developed and answered many questions. Science also had enormous prestige because it changed our lives. It changed the world. This gave rise to an extremely powerful materialist movement, and also a scientific one, which dominated the 19th and 20th centuries. When we get to 1900, scientists think they've figured everything out. You have Lord Kelvin who, at one point, says, "Science is finished. We have put into equations all the eternal secrets of matter and the heavens." He says, "Physics is done, all that's left is to adjust the decimals." And others are saying the same kind of thing. You have Berthelot, a great chemist, who says, "Chemistry is finished. Give me 10 years to complete science." And then Max Born and many, many others. So, we were in a total illusion because after that, there would be 6 or 7 major revolutions. That's when the curve goes back up. So, it starts with thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is a science that was born in the 19th century with Carnot, Clausius, Boltzmann. And then, Clausius established the second law, which means that entropy always increases in a closed system when there is no input of information. And so, that means there is an arrow of time, meaning we're heading toward what is called the heat death of the universe. All the stars, one after another, will go out. And Boltzmann understood this very well right away. He said if we're heading toward heat death, that means there was a beginning to the universe. And the question of the beginning is crucial, because if there is a beginning to time, space, and matter, then there is a God. All atheist worldviews, without exception, have always believed that the world was eternal in the past. So Boltzmann throws a wrench into all of this, and on top of that, he says, well, if specific order is decreasing, that means that at the very beginning, there was a very particular order. Well, it didn't have a very strong impact. A lot of people fought against it. In the end, they committed suicide. Then, there was a second major revolution, quantum mechanics. In the infinitely small, we realized that the world, reality itself, is actually veiled. We can't access ultimate reality. On top of that, it's probabilistic, there are wave functions, and it's not deterministic. That is, when we take measurements or when an atom decays, we can't just switch T to minus T. So, that also shakes up materialist ideas. The third colossal revolution was Einstein's. Einstein, along with others, came up with the idea of special relativity, that is, the speed of light is an absolute, which means that time is relative. And then, on his own, in 1915, he proposed general relativity. And that was a revolution, meaning he explained that space is curved by mass. Basically, we're not going to get into Einstein's equations, but what he's saying is that time, space, and matter are interconnected. They can't exist without each other. No philosopher, no thinker had ever thought of that before. It's something completely new. They explain to you that if you're near the sun, time passes more slowly. If you're in a black hole, time stops. If you travel at the speed of light, time also stops. These are completely crazy ideas that were Einstein's intuition, which he then turned into theory and equations. He made predictions, and they were quickly confirmed. Now, everyone agrees on this. There's no more debate about it. If you want, we're sure that it works. So this revolution leads to a fourth one, which is the idea of the expansion of the universe. No one had ever thought of that before. Einstein himself didn't believe in it. He had tinkered with his equations a bit so that there wouldn't be any expansion. But a Russian genius, Alexander Friedman, one of the 4 or 5 people at the time who truly understood Einstein's equations. At barely 33 years old, at 16, he was already publishing in the world's top mathematics journals. At 33, he wrote an article that he submitted to the German journal Physica on March 29, 1922, which is almost exactly 100 years ago to the day from today. And in this article, for the first time, he explains that the universe is expanding and that, in the beginning, it was certainly just a single point. So, at the time, no one believed it, everyone thought it was completely crazy. But later, with the help of abelimetra, with the help of some unexpected discoveries like Wilson's, the cosmic background radiation, the abundances, and all that, I'll spare you the details, but after a few decades, it was all confirmed. Today, everyone agrees, there was a Big Bang. So, all of this raises huge questions. If the universe is expanding like this, what's going to happen next? So people think that maybe there will be a contraction at some point, and that will alternate between cycles of Big Bang and Big Crunch. But in 1998, it was discovered that after 9 billion years, the universe started accelerating again instead of contracting due to maybe curvature or maybe gravity. Actually, not at all. If we follow the equations, it's going to keep accelerating endlessly. And then, in the 2000s, some cosmology theorems came out saying that if a Big Bang wasn't the absolute beginning, if there were other Big Bangs before the Big Bang, there still wouldn't be an infinite number of them. There has to be a beginning, both for space and for matter. These are completely astonishing things that we never would have thought could be addressed by science. So, what happens next? Those who discovered that the Big Bang is real went back to the equations, especially Robert Dicke. And they calculated that if, just a moment after the Big Bang, the expansion rate of the universe had changed by even the 15th decimal place in either direction, we wouldn't be here to talk about it. The guy falls off his chair and says, "What is this thing, this fine-tuning?" And behind him, there are dozens of scientists who will make dozens of discoveries and say the same thing. That is to say, the 20 or 30 constants or parameters that determine the universe and the forces of the universe, if you change them even a tiny bit, and we know how to model this today, we've put it into computers, the universe falls apart. It just doesn't work anymore. So, this is called the fine-tuning of the universe, and it raises huge questions. Who? How? Why this fine-tuning? And then, yet another revolution in biology. In biology, it was thought that the transition from non-living to living matter was something very simple. In reality, we realized that it's an immense chasm. You have to go from non-living matter to a cell, because everything that is alive on Earth, from bacteria to humans, including all plants and animals, is made up of cells. But a cell is not just anything. There is always DNA. Now, DNA is an ultra-complicated language that appeared perfectly 3.8 billion years ago, which codes all living things and emerged from the laws of the universe. To give you an idea, the information density in DNA is 44 trillion times greater than the densest thing humans have created in the 21st century. A technological marvel. But DNA alone isn't enough. You also need proteins, enzymes, a membrane, and metabolism. It's just crazy. So, we've crossed from one shore to the other. We've gone from the inanimate to the living. But it's because of fine-tuning that's even more precise than the fine-tuning of physics. All of this raises huge questions. There's also been a revolution in mathematics with Gödel, who, through the incompleteness theorems, and also an ontological proof about God, shows this. All right, let's move on quickly. So, if we sum it up, there are two things. First, the universe is 1,000 times more complex than we thought a century ago. It's not even comparable. And we might know that we'll never know everything, because every time we open up one question, 3 more pop up. And secondly, among all this mess, all these discoveries, there are 2 that are fundamental to our topic. The first is that there is, almost certainly, a beginning to both space and matter. We know this through science, but we also know it through rationality, mathematics, physics, and then thermodynamics and cosmology, which I mentioned to you. If there is a beginning to both space and matter, that means this emergence was caused by something transcendent to all of that, something that is neither temporal, nor spatial, nor material, which had the power to create everything that exists and, on top of that, set everything just right so that atoms could be stable, stars could burn for 10 billion years, and complex life could develop. All things that are completely improbable, as we know today. So this raises huge questions, gigantic questions, and it's a real turning point for science. So when you look at the landscape today, if you look at the world, you get the impression that this question of the existence of God can't be solved, because there are lots of people who believe, lots of people who don't, and very intelligent people on both sides. You might say, how could I, with my little brain, go any further? But actually, it's a bit like Newton. Newton said, I stood on the shoulders of giants who came before me. That's why I was able to go further. So today, why are there people who believe? Because there are plenty of reasons to believe that are pretty intuitive. The existence of the universe, its order, the mind. All of that was established by philosophy, which turned them into reasons to believe, proofs of the existence of God. You also have lots of things that come from religion, like miracles, apparitions, saints, and testimonies from people who have encountered God. All of that makes for a huge bundle of reasons to believe in God, which is why in this country, 5 centuries ago, 10 centuries ago, 15 centuries ago, everyone believed in God. Okay, for a while, science seemed to offer a structured discourse that was different, but science has now changed its stance. Today, it actually puts atheists in a tough spot. So now, there's a convergence. This is very new. There's a convergence of all the clues, of everything, a bundle of clues, if you will, of evidence that is strong, plentiful, rational, and independent, which allows us to move toward. Then, after that, everyone will decide for themselves. Everyone is free to assess things, because the real world should be studied by everyone. But what's behind all this, in a way, is that we're at the dawn of a revolution, if you will, something that's going to change. A great reset. And then, I'll finish with a bit of my personal story. When I was 20, I wasn't a believer. I was convinced that believers were irrational people, that they fully accepted being irrational. And someone put rational reasons to believe in my hands. I looked at them, thinking I'd find the flaw in 5 minutes, but actually, they held up really well. And I realized it was very solid, if you will. I was really surprised. And so, that surprise, I think the world is going to experience it now, as we draw the implications from the scientific discoveries of the last 100 years, which completely changed the game. Thank you.